Hello fellas, hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be talking about the Warrior of the Elements Monk subclass, previously known as the Way of the Four Elements, but it looks like in 2024 they're sort of leaning away from the more strict aesthetic of what a monk is, harnessing their own ki and turning that into strength, having their own, and it's pretty evident. You know, with like subclass, instead of being called Way of the Elements, it's now Warrior of the Elements. Instead of key points, it is focus points. It's definitely a big discussion to have about the aesthetic of what a class is, but that's not necessarily the topic for this video here. We're here to just talk about Warrior of the Elements, my thoughts on it, and how it seems to shake out. Now, historically, Way of the Four Elements was always a problematic kind of subclass. It sort of turned you into this third caster that had a bunch of, things that you could spend your key points on, sort of in the same vein as sorcery points, if you guys are familiar with the alternate ruling in the DMG. I don't actually know if it's in the 2024 DMG, but sort of fueling your spells, well, quote-unquote spells, with key points. And it always was kind of considered to be the worst subclass in the game. It didn't really play well at all with the base monk, and the scaling of it was pretty abysmal. It was a mess, and there have been so many community rewrites, but this one is the official new Way of the Elements, Warrior of the Elements monk, introduced by Wizards of the Coast in 2024. So, I figured we could just get some thoughts out there. This is the first, really, I think this is the first non-spellcaster that we've done. Is that right? We've done sorcerer, we've done ranger, we've done warlock, we've done paladin. So we aren't going to be padding this video talking about spells. But yeah, I figured it was time to look into martials. I generally enjoy playing... I would be lying if I said I enjoyed playing martials. I enjoy playing fighter. Fighter is kind of my shebang, but I've played monk once or twice, and I've kind of did a little reading on it right before this, and it seems to have lost a lot of the things that made it really kind of quirky. In exchange for more consistency, I think. They definitely tackled a couple of the bigger issues, I think, with Monk. Stunning Strike, of course, being a big point of contention. But all of that is, well, that's water under the bridge, not what we're here to talk about today. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's focus on the Warrior of Elements monk. Now, it's interesting because these warriors tap into the power of the elemental planes. They harness their supernatural focus, and they tame the energy of elemental chaos to empower themselves in and out of battle. Pretty neat flavor. It's kind of interesting, I think, because flavor-wise, the amount of interactions I think you would have with these elemental planes is pretty limited in a campaign. It's definitely a big ask if, in the same vein, the homogenization of everything being acquired at level 3, you definitely would, it's one of those things you'd have to talk to your DM about, of like, well, where am I getting this power? How is this power coming out? Is it sort of like a sorcerer where, perhaps you were raised or something by someone who was in touch with the elemental planes, or maybe you're playing in a campaign that is very much leans into those. I think it's definitely interesting to write the many different ways that you can become a warrior of the elements. Maybe you're a genasi and it comes naturally to you, or I don't know, maybe it's been over 100 years and you've been stuck in an iceberg, right? But with that, let's just get to elemental attunement. Why not? So, Level 3 Elemental Attunement. At the start of your turn, you can expend 1 focus point to imbue yourself with elemental energy. The energy lasts for 10 minutes or until you have the incapacitated condition, and you gain the following benefits while this feature is active. When you make an unarmed strike, your reach is 10 feet greater than normal as elemental energy extends from you. This actually puts your reach very high. It puts it up to 15 feet. Of course, 10 feet greater than normal. 10 greater than 5 is 15. And this actually it's pretty interesting how this works out. Because the monk is, of course, relatively frail for a martial. Rangers, paladins, and fighters, they have their D10 hit dice, and barbarians have their D12, and rogues, being the other D8 martial, they are generally going to be at range. I think more often than not, you will see them farther away. I've actually run for a few melee rogues, and it's a bit of a struggle bus there, so... but yeah, this is, I think, an interesting way to sort of counter the general squishiness of the monk. Even with their unarmed defense, it's 10 plus their dex plus their wisdom. They're going to be sitting at... Ooh, wrong one. They're more than likely going to be sitting at, starting the game at 16 AC and sort of struggling to get much higher than that outside of magic items. Of course, you cap out at 20, but it's going to be quite a while until you're able to pump your dexterity and your wisdom, and especially if you want feats and whatnot, right? But yeah, having a 15-foot reach does kind of remedy that. It makes it so that you're not going to have to be using your Step of the Wind to... you're not going to have to be using your bonus action to disengage. With your bonus action freed up, you will be able to use stuff like Flurry of Blows more to be able to dish out more damage and, in general, be a lot safer. It is also a little interesting because, attacks of opportunities, you do sort of command a very large presence on the battlefield, and, well, it might be a little... I don't know, it'll be a little difficult if, everyone's packed in, but if someone's trying to get out of your range to maybe get to a caster or something and they're farther away, you're going to be able to hit them from a pretty big distance. It's just a small little thing, but it was just an interesting thought that I had. This is also, of course, only unarmed strikes, which I believe means that... Yeah, you're not going to be able to use this with monk weapons. So if you're going to be going for Warrior of Elements, you're pretty much, and you're using Elemental Attunement, you're pretty much going all in on the unarmed striking. It's one thing also to note is grappling and shoving as well. You can grapple from quite far away. So very cool, I think. Definitely a lot of different things you can play around with the increased reach, but most importantly, I think, is the being much more safe, being able to still dole out these unarmed strikes, but being behind your fighter or your barbarian or your paladin while you do it. Additionally, you get elemental strikes, which is whenever you hit with your unarmed strike, and you can cause it to deal your choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage rather than its normal damage type. When you deal one of these types with it, you can also force the target to make a strength saving throw. On a failed saving, you move the target up to 10 feet toward or away from you as elemental energy swirls around it. Now, this is really cool, in my opinion. You get to choose the damage of the unarmed strike each hit. So, one of the main things about the 4 Elements Monk Pack in 2014 is you were pretty short on your choices. You only got a few choices, really, so you'd have to kind of full spec into one of the elements. It was way of the 4 elements, and you had options for everything, but a lot of the times, you'd end up seeing people just take, the flames of the fire snake, I believe it was called, or water whip or something, and not really be able to be a master of the multiple elements, whereas this, that's what you are. You get, your acid and your fire and whatnot. You get cold, lightning, thunder. And it's actually really neat, I think, for resistance checking, if that's something you want to do. But also vulnerability exploiting. You know, if you're fighting a troll, you never have to have that instance where you're like, I really wish I took something that did fire damage, because now it's like, well, you can make one of those unarmed strikes deal fire damage. If you find, you know, something that's vulnerable to acid, you can just quickly switch to acid damage. I think being able to cycle between all of these without having to spend an extra resource is really interesting. And I think it's very flavorful. You know, I think that if you're going to be this master of elements, then you should be able to control all of the elements. I think aesthetically, it's so cool. You know, punching as arcs of lightning kind of stretch out, or sending forward, you know, just these condensed this condensed energy that thunders out. I think it's really cool. And of course, you know, with this extra strength saving throw, if I'm reading this correctly, you can kind of you can move people around quite a bit. If you take a flurry of blows and you continue to, well, I guess you can't move between attacks, but, you know, if you take flurry of blows, you do your attack, and then you move forward, and then you bonus action attack, you can push someone up to 30 feet away. Or, you know, if someone is pretty farther away from you, you can get within 15 feet and just pull them right to you and reposition as you kind of skirt around. I think that's really cool, and I'm sorry to make this reference, but it kind of makes me think of like an insect from League of Legends. Sorry. But like, yeah, you could like pull someone in 10 feet closer to you with your action, and then skirt around them with your bonus action, push them 20 feet closer to your team. Your party, I suppose. There's definitely a lot of options. The only thing that's a little sad is that this does, it is a strength saving throw, and it does use your wisdom for this. So the scaling of the saving throw will be a bit lower, since you're most likely going to be prioritizing leveling your dexterity. So it'll be a bit lower for a little while, but no, I think that elemental attunement is such a, I think it's a really cool ability. I think it gives the monk really a lot of the things that the monk would like. Extra safety, and a big one, of course, is being able to kind of circumvent resistances. If you've ever fought an undead that resists bludgeoning before level 6, it is such a pain. So to be able to kind of just switch that around to something where you can, yes, completely circumvent that resistance it's very nice. And being able to move around enemies as well is really nice. I DM for a game where 2 of the players have telekinetic, and it is certainly something when every turn you get asked, oh, can you make a strength saving throw? And with this, it's like every attack you're getting asked that. So it's fun. I think it's really fun. It seems to be a really cool ability, and I think it's infinitely better than what 4 Elements Monk had before. Also at level 3, you get the Elementalism spell, which is kind of just a cute little version of like Elemental Prestidigitation. You can do a little bit of, you know, Air Blast. You can create a thin shroud of dust or sand. Not much to really talk about here. It's cute. I do think it's really cute. You can use it to light fires, and you can actually create clean water. Granted, it evaporates within minutes, so I don't know how that works if you drink it, but no, it's just a cute little flavor spell. I enjoy it. I think it's fun to use. Why not? You know, it's one of those things where it's like, why not just add it? Alright, so at level 6, you get Elemental Burst. As a magic action, you can spend 2 focus points to cause elemental energy to burst in a 20-foot radius sphere, centered on a point within 120 feet of yourself. Choose a damage type, and each creature within the sphere must make a dex saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes damage of the chosen type equal to 3 rolls of your martial arts die, which at this level is a d8. So this is doing about as much damage as a shatter. On a successful save, a creature takes half as much damage. I think this is an interesting one, because your save, kind of like I mentioned before, is going to be lacking behind. At this level, It's probably going to be a DC 14, if I am not mistaken. Assuming you have 3 in wisdom, or +3 in wisdom. So I don't know, using this, it's kind of nice as a form of guaranteed AoE damage. I think that if you're able to hit like 3 or so people with it, even if a few of them succeed, it is a pretty sizable chunk of damage. 3d8 is nothing to really sniff at, especially if you roll decently. But I think that this is one of those things that's going to be more of a situational use. It kind of is, it's pretty far away from what a monk would normally do, and it does introduce the ability to deal AoE damage, which is helpful. I think having this in the back pocket is nice, but also it's difficult to use, I think. Dexterity saving throws are, I actually am pretty sure a fair amount of monsters actually get evasion. I could be very wrong about that, but I do believe quite a few things get evasion, or eventually you're going to have like magic resistance and things. And even as early as level 6, you might run into stuff with magic resistances. So I think that it's hard for this to be really reliable as a solid damage option. It will do damage, and that's what's really nice, is that on a successful save, a creature takes half damage. But you know, what's the average for 3d8? About 15 to 17, I think. And so if you catch 3 creatures and you deal, what, 15 plus, let's say one fail and 2 successes, that's about 30 damage, which realistically is not bad. But at that point, it's just damage, right? You're not able to use your elemental strikes to move things around. You're not able to make these multiple attacks, and by this level, your unarmed strikes are dealing, you know, quite a sizable amount themselves. They're dealing 3d8, but they have the additional benefit of adding your ability modifier 3 times if you hit them. So, I don't know. I think that there's going to be situations where you can use this, and it's going to feel cool to pull off, but it's definitely more of a niche sort of ability. I don't think that this is anything that's very defining in the class. I think that this is very much something that if enemies are grouped up and you have an opportunity to use it, it'll be cool. It'll be pretty cool. Another small little nitpick is I do wish that you could exclude creatures from it. I think it's strange that you're presented as this warrior of the elements who can sculpt them and whatnot, and you're not able to exclude your own allies from this elemental burst. I do wish that would, I think that would help it a decent bit. But as it is, it's kind of hard to find a lot of use with. I think if I keep talking on it, it'll be a little redundant. So we'll go ahead and move on. And we'll be moving on to Stride of the Elements. While your elemental attunement is active, you also have a fly speed and a swim speed equal to your speed. See, normally this would be cool, but this is actually extra nice on a monk, because at this level, you get this at level 11. And you can see at this level, you have an extra 20 feet of movement. So you have 50 feet of movement and 50 feet of fly speed for 10 minutes. 50 feet of swim speed for 10 minutes. That's pretty strong. And it only costs 1 focus point to be able to do this. So I do think that this is actually quite strong. You know, of course, the clear sort of thing is that at this point, melee enemies will never be able to touch you. You'll be able to float 15 feet above them, shoot out your attacks, and then float back up. Yeah, I don't know. Fly speeds are always really good. This is also useful, like, out of combat. Being able to, you know, match your wizards in their mobility and whatnot, or your sorcerers and things, and, you know, it would not be a Jin Kitsu video if I didn't mention Misty Step. But, you know, this is kind of on the par of, like, the level of mobility that this offers. Granted, you can't really escape grapples or anything, and it's not going to get you out of, you know, the general sorts of, like, binds or whatnot, but having a fly speed equal to 50 feet is truly nothing to sniff at. The uses of it, it's hard to really directly quantify it, but They are used quite a lot. um, I think you will find that if you have a fly speed, it'll be very, very easy to use it basically every turn in combat and use it quite often out of combat. Swim speed, in my opinion, is a little less remarkable, but mostly because you don't encounter swimming as much as you would flying. But it's nice. Having a swim speed is nice. And especially one that's 50 feet. If you want to go underwater to try and avoid enemies, that could always be really helpful. And you're speedy enough that you can kind of, you'll never really have to worry about choking or anything. But I don't know, at that point, we're really getting a lot of hypotheticals. So, sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't see this. So I think that there's really no use in going too into that. All right, last one. Wow, we're 20 minutes in and we're on the last ability. I'm so used to talking about spells that, usually we're just starting the subclass at this point. But at level 17, you get Elemental Epitome. So this is while your Elemental Attunement is active. You can see that, these two abilities are tied in with your Elemental Attunement, which you're probably going to have just about every combat. It only costs a focus point, and so I think that it's pretty fair to say you'll have this every combat, and especially once you get where are you? Once you get something like perfect focus, you already have uncanny metabolism here. You're probably going to be having this every combat. But with Elemental Epitome, while your Elemental Attunement is active, you gain resistance to one of the following damage types of your choice: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. At the beginning of each of your turns, you can change this choice. Very useful. If you're fighting a dragon and it has a fire breath, you can just choose to have resistance to fire. What's neat is you can change it at the end of every turn. So, I mean, if you're fighting Tiamat, you're pretty set. I don't know. Just having an extra damage resistance is really nice, and especially, at level 17, you're really fighting some titans, right? And so, if they do end up doing a type of elemental damage, being able to just cycle to resistance is very, very good to have, I think. What's also worth noting is if you're kind of traveling in the tundra, you can give yourself cold resistance to make it a lot easier to survive there. If you're traveling through a Avernus, you can give yourself fire resistance. And I do think that those two are going to be the ones you use the most. I think lightning, thunder, and acid damage are much less, much less prevalent. I think there's also something to be said that the type of campaign you would play this in probably has some sort of elemental vibes to it. And so there's a chance that you will end up running into more of the the elemental types. If you're playing, say, Princes of the Apocalypse, and you end up fighting a big fire titan, and granted it's level 17, but you give yourself resistance to fire damage, and you're basically taking half damage the entire fight, which is pretty strong in my opinion. I do think that, now, if I'm not mistaken, it is kind of strange. Now, granted, it is free resistance, but at level 18, you can spend 3 focus points, and for a minute, you have resistance to all damage. So I do think that, I don't know. I don't know, because this is cool in that you can swap the resistances to kind of, factor in for all the different damage types that might be coming your way, but you can also just use superior defense, especially if it's something that's swapping every turn. Being able to be on top of that, let's say an enemy changes their damage type at the start of their turn, there's really no way to be on top of that, right? So, a little redundant, I think. Next, though, is Destructive Stride. When you use your Step of the Wind, your speed increased by 20 feet until the end of the turn, which is kind of crazy because Step of the Wind lets you dash as a bonus action. So at this level, you have 60 feet of movement. If you dash as a bonus action, you have 120 feet. And now with this, when you dash, that goes up to 80 feet. So 160 feet of movement. For the duration, any creature of your choice takes damage equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die when you enter a space within 5 feet of it. The damage type is your choice of your elemental types, and it can only take the damage once per turn. It's kind of cute. It does a d12 damage. I don't know. It's kind of... I think that more so the speed that you get from it is going to be useful, because you're going to be able to fly with that, right? So you have 160 foot fly speed when you use Step of the Wind. Well, rather 80 feet fly speed, but because you're dashing as a bonus action, it will be 160 feet. I don't know. You can just like use this and incinerate a lot of goblins in your path. It's kind of just a nice buff to use with Step of the Wind, and I think a lot of the times, in my experience playing monks, sometimes it feels bad to not be able to flurry of blows or something. So, you know, being able to tack on a little extra with Step of the Wind is nice. Movement is good. You never really know when you're going to be in a situation that you're going to need that much movement. So being able to just move as much as you need to is nice. It's a nice insurance blanket, I think. And then lastly is Empowered Strikes. Once on each of your turns, you can deal extra damage to a target equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die when you hit it with an unarmed strike. Extra damage is the same type dealt by that strike. You know, it's an extra d12 damage. it's you know, it's like you roll I guess when you word it as it's like you roll a crit each turn, it makes it sound more enticing. You know, dealing 2d12 with one of your unarmed strikes it's consistent damage, you know. And granted, it's only once per turn, but you know, at this level you're probably having longer combats, and so those d12s over time they will add up. I think that they'll add up quite well. I don't know. I think that Elemental Epitome as a whole, it's kind of a boring capstone, in my opinion. It's nothing, like, remarkable. I think that the damage resistance is redundant. I think Destructive Stride is cool. But, of course, a creature can only take the damage once per turn, and it's an extra d12 damage to kind of just tack on, I suppose, as a consolation prize if you have to use Step of the Wind to disengage, which, mind you, you're probably not going to be disengaging a lot, considering you have fly speed. But it kind of tacks onto the dash. Well, actually, if you do have to enter a space within 5 feet, so you probably will end up disengaging to, you know, not run through and provoke those attacks of opportunity. An Empowered Strike, it's good, but it's kind of just tacked on. I don't know. I think that overall this capstone I guess it makes you better at what you do, which there are certainly capstones like that, but I think that they're boring. I'm not a game designer by any means, so, you know, off the top of my head, I can't think of much better, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to be super impactful. I think that this subclass, you know, to kind of get into the final thoughts of this, I think that this subclass definitely peaks at level 3. I think that Elemental Attunement is really cool and really strong, and I like it a lot more as an alternative to, you know, whatever spell casting, whatever that Way of the Four Elements was doing back in 2014. I think that it very much lets you feel like you are a master of the elements and you're able to harness them for your own good. But really, everything after is kind of just building on it. I think that they recognize that they kind of made the coolest feature at level 3, and then, you know, Elemental Burst is sort of a very niche ability, a bit of a nothing burger ability. Stride of the Elements just makes Elemental Attunement better, and Elemental Epitome just makes Elemental Attunement better, so I think that it's a good subclass. I do think it's good. And, you know, when we get into the discussion of the difference between if a subclass adds to a class, or like adds something new to a class, or builds on what it already does, Warrior of Elements certainly builds on what Monk already does. It builds on the idea of them being a quick and kind of fragile and mobile striker. And it helps them to stay safe while being able to attack different vulnerabilities or bypass resistances or whatnot. But I don't know. I just think that everything after Elemental Attunement is boring, realistically. If I had to, like, I don't know, if you like held me at gunpoint and put me to put this on a tier list, I'd say it's like a B tier kind of subclass. It's not offensive, and it's not. I just don't think it's great. I think flavor wise, it's not like fantastic. I mean, I don't know. I think that it's. I take that back. I think that in play it's cool. I think that being able to shoot arcs of lightning or, you know, gouts of fire is with your unarmed strikes is cool. But I don't know. I just don't find it that interesting. I simply don't find it that interesting. And I think really the only thing that discerns it is the elemental damage bypass, which you could argue is the point of the entire subclass. But no, I kind of wish that there is. I just wish there was more at level 11 or 17. Even if it was a ribbon ability at level 11, I wish there was more here. I wish that elemental epitome was a little stronger. I am personally of the belief that capstones should be strong. You know, how often do you get to a campaign at level 17? You know, you should feel the apex of your power, and this doesn't really, I think, do that, in my opinion. All of that said, though, that's kind of all I've got. This was my first Marshall video, and I ended up talking a bit more than I expected, but I do hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course, feel free to comment if I got anything wrong or, you know, your own thoughts on it. That would be really appreciated. Feel free to like as well. I'm starting to be able to do this a bit more, so I would never say no to a bit more, you know, a bit. Maybe try to spread the word of these videos. But with that, thank you guys. I'll see all of you later, okay? Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good night or a good day.